Have you ever been in a situation where you feel like you know what's going to happen next? You've seen this before. The weather feels a certain way, the wind's blowing just right, you know it's going to rain. Judging by a few inputs, you figured out what's going to happen next. What happens when computers can do the same thing, only looking at millions and millions of patterns? Can computers tell the future? We're about to find out.
Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Tomas.
I'm Thomas.
And this is episode 6 of TechBus. Today we brought in a special guest. I'll let him introduce himself and kind of let you know what he does for a living.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm Grant Stanley, the CEO of Bric. Bric uses machine learning to study timesheets to recommend more accurate project plans. Our end goal is to increase employee utilization at professional services firms.
Awesome. So as you know that we usually do a couple segments, and this is our first guest. So we're just going to have an open conversation and get to know him and just have an open dialogue and hopefully learn something about the technical side of business. And then when we get back, we'll jump right into that conversation. Thank you for joining us again. Hey everybody, welcome back. Episode 6. Today we have a special guest, Grant Stanley. Kind of give us an introduction of what he does before. You know me, Tomas, you know Thomas. To get started, we were talking about, before the show started, about the duality of entrepreneurship. And
Yeah.
why don't you we'll jump back in that conversation.
Yeah, so we had Thomas and I were talking about we ran into each other down at the Exchange building in downtown Omaha.
You have an office down there too?
Yeah, like 10 feet from your office.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about kind of what the future of technology is like. Around my main focus is predictive analytics, data science, machine learning. I think we covered stuff like about one of the curious things about humans is we will say that. If computers could drive cars, that would be like really strong, awesome artificial intelligence. Like, that's the future.
Yeah.
And then when it actually happens, we're like, that's just machine learning. Like, we do the same thing with like Google in our pockets. Like we're like, ugh, it's just machine learning, or Facebook even. Like if you think about, it's really easy to marginalize. Content production, blogging, social media, but the thing that makes us human is our sociability. And so it'll be like, oh, Facebook, they're a huge distraction, a giant waste of time. We treat it as a toy instead of a fundamental human utility of connecting us with other humans. So it's interesting how we downplay the value of technology in our daily lives.
I want to actually settle a bet here. Do you think that a computer and a machine can make a cheeseburger?
Oh yeah, totally.
Our bet was, he seems to believe.
We got a minimum wage discussion here the other day. So that's where this comes from.
Yeah, I think it's about 40 years out to where an entire building, from start to finish, no human beings in there besides one person, he says, is actually running the entire process. And I mean from the truck coming in, unloading the truck, putting everything.
I was talking about ordering. They come in, order on a kiosk, goes into a queue, the machine spits out the cheeseburger.
That's possible.
There's one guy back there putting the buns in, feeding the machine and stuff.
That's possible.
We're
but
already
don't you
there.
agree?
That's possible today.
But the entire process is still going to need a human hand in it. Wouldn't you say? How long would it be before we stop needing a human hand completely at that location, minus the one person who would manage maintenance and stuff like that?
So I don't necessarily know that the person would even manage maintenance. I think they would manage more of the experience of things. So we almost look like, really the future of work looks like web development, where you're thinking about how the interaction is. You're studying the process. So we think that when humans and computers work together, that the humans are downgraded in their roles, and what we find is that they're actually elevated. When we currently build products today with engineers writing lines of code, but if we, as frameworks advance and machine learning algorithms advance, it just becomes easier and easier and easier. I've started to learn videography because I've wanted to just figure out how to do it. And I'm like, man, why didn't I get into this earlier? It's really easy. The software's great. You can adjust audio and take things out with just a click of a button. The algorithms take care of it all for you. And I'm talking to some OGs, original gangsters of videography, and they're like, oh yeah, no, it used to be one of those things where you would make a slight tweak and have to wait for 2 hours for it to render and adjust. But as technology takes over and humans and computers work together, we actually move up the value chain into creating the experience. And so you see more and more like.
But when you say we move up, like who? Like people in the first world?
Yeah.
Or,
oh man.
I mean, if you talk on a global scale, does that really scale where we can all be these high-end engineers? Or does that make sense? What I'm saying?
I don't know. Humans need, like, they're full of need. Like we desire a ton of things.
Sure.
So the thought that we wouldn't be able to find roles for everyone. Now, you have. I've been interacting a lot with a lot of people from India who didn't come here because they're looking for money. They came here for better education type things. And so if they're not coming here just for money or for opportunity, they're coming here to learn and expand their minds. They're moving up. Globalization reduces everything to the median. They're moving up, and then old white dudes are moving down because of barriers and things being removed. So I think some people will definitely get hurt. I think personally that as Americans and really as people, we think of technology adoption as a fashion choice. And so you'll see people be like, oh, I don't use a mobile phone. Like, why not? Well, I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to interact with the world like this. Well, that's how the world is interacting. That's what the technology wants. And so either you're going to be left behind or you're going to adapt. It's not a fashion choice. And I think people who approach it as like, I'm not a technical person or I'm not a math person, they're going to fall behind because we are all now just creating experiences for people using technology, and we're doing it at scale. And so our math people need to be focused on what makes humans tick and enjoyable. I talk to a lot of engineers who are like, I don't watch television. Like, how do you not watch the shared culture of our time?
Oh yeah, I don't watch television.
God, you're such a, like, how do you relate to people?
He does it. No,
I don't watch TV. All right, I'm gonna blow your mind here. I don't watch TV. Rarely listen to music.
How do you develop your taste? Like, how do you develop your design aesthetic and your cultural taste?
I mean, I listen to podcasts. I do listen to some music, but I find no value in TV or in movies.
So Thomas, is he relatable most of the time?
You might be putting him on the spot there.
So anyway,
but
entrepreneurship.
Those are boring things. Like, I don't want to talk about Game of Thrones with the next person. Like, I just don't care.
But if you build, so one of the things that I struggle with is
I just know what the show is. So. Never seen it.
And a lot of engineers struggle a ton with building something that's relatable. If you guys have watched Silicon Valley, this third season, like they built this thing and all the engineers are like this thing that you built is amazing, and they hand it over to everyone else and they're like, this is scary, like this is like some Terminator shit, it's gonna kill us all. That's the biggest thing that's holding back like AI and machine learning, is doing it in such a way that is culturally acceptable or relatable. If you think about, so things, I often think, I like Kevin Kelly's ideas that technology is a phylum of biology, that it's its own thing. And in this idea, technology has certain wants that it has. And one of the things that, if something is digital, it wants to be shared. Now, if I told you that 20 years ago you were going to share intimate details about your life and that you would actually enjoy doing it, you'd be like, no. But the magic of Facebook is they took good, solid engineering and made it relatable. They acculturated it. They made a lot of missteps in that because of most people who work with computers don't see any value or any enjoyment in seeing what the millions and millions of other humans enjoy. But that's what unleashed Facebook. And with Bric, our biggest challenge is we're building software for creative and technical people who become business owners and then ask other creative and technical people to be tracked. Because managers need that data in order to run their business, invoice clients, and cut payroll. But what Bric is trying to do is make that data collection, that tracking, relatable, where employees actually want to be tracked. Because things that are digital want to be shared, things that are networked want to be tracked. I think that over the next 5 or 10 years, we will want the networks and the AIs to track us, similar to the hamburger station. When I walk into a restaurant, there's a lot of value. One of the needs that I want is that everything is custom to me, that they know my name, they know my order, that I sit down and they don't give me a menu, they give me 3 choices of all the food that I want. They don't show me the stuff. If I'm trying to lose weight, they don't show that to me. That I'm only interrupted when I want to be. But you do that by being tracked. And I think that that's the next big trend in technology, is allowing technology, it wants to track us, and figuring out ways to make that socially acceptable or make that even appealing.
So you mentioned, actually I have 2 questions. You mentioned creative people and then wanting to be tracked. What kind of creative industry are you talking about?
Yeah.
And how would those, the A-type mind and B-type, how would those other people want to be tracked?
Yes.
Why would they want
so Bric is trying to make it more efficient to run a creative agency. So right now we're focused on programmers and graphic designers. Okay. The great thing about that is most of those businesses are great places to work. They're run by other technical people, but those technical people who start running the business, and then they spend all of their time managing time, not being creative, the reason they started the business. So what Bric is trying to do is help them improve how they manage time and manage their agency. What we found is that we could give them, we started off as a project capacity planning tool, so where you could plan out all the work that your agency is going to do. And what we found were people didn't want to spend time doing that, even though they were spending time. If we centralized it, it wasn't appealing. They didn't trust their analytical abilities, and so we released time tracking. So we could track time, and you could compare your performance. You could plan a project and compare how well you did. But what we found were that people started to use that punitively.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for coming back for the second segment here. When we left off, Grant was kind of talking about his product Bric and how it uses time tracking, kind of looking into the future and kind of trying to predict trends. So when we come back here, I actually wanted to ask a couple of questions related to predictive analytics. To me, the two biggest challenges are going to be correlation and causality, and the second is black swans.
Yep.
So I was going to kind of give a definition of those and kind of explain how do you handle that in predictive analytics. So the first one is correlation and causality. So just because there's a correlation between two things doesn't mean there's causality. An example of that is that, back when they were trying to cure polio, they noticed that people were eating a lot of ice cream when polio would go up. And they actually thought like ice cream caused polio. But there was a correlation there. So there's a correlation there, must be causality. But it actually was just when there was an increase in temperature, polio would actually be easier to transmit. And people just happened to eat more ice cream during hot months. So there was correlation, no causality. So how do you deal with that in predictive analytics? And it almost seems like you need a human touch to figure that out, because computers are really good at correlating things, but how do you, does that make sense?
Typically, so one of the nice things about, so there's a concept of, there's two pieces of this. One is less wrong. So when you're producing models, your goal is to make things less wrong, not more right. And people often forget that. Again, it's not about computers replacing humans, it's about computer-human symbiosis, where we're making things better, we're taking things out. Bric does not prevent you from doing anything, we're simply providing recommendations. So the value of us being less wrong by studying those timesheets is we are presenting you with what is a likely scenario. Now what's interesting about humans is we have a cognitive bias called the project planning fallacy, where we tend to plan off what is ideal. Under ideal circumstances, with an ideal client, with an ideal team, with an ideal budget, this is the project that it'll take. So for us to provide you with a view of what's most likely, and then you can adjust it from there, we're helping you become less wrong. And that's probably one of the reasons that the machine learning, that we take AI and we call it machine learning, that nasty derogatory term, because once you apply statistics to something, you're able to analyze how right it is or how wrong it is. What's interesting is I, for the last 8 years, was selling predictive analytics to Fortune 500 companies, and you'd go in and you talk to salespeople. And you'd say, okay, I can help you talk to people who have a higher likelihood to close. With 80% accuracy, I can tell you who's actually going to sign up. And they would poo-poo you. And you would ask them, like, 80% is pretty good. And they're like, yeah, but I'm a professional. I'm 100% accurate. Like, and they wouldn't necessarily say 100%, but they would act as if they were 100% accurate because they got paid, they were professional, and so they were so accurate. What's interesting is if you actually study it, most sales guys, they can identify who's likely to actually close on a deal with about 10% accuracy. So it wasn't even like a little increase, less wrong, you think, oh, like 2% increase. No, this was blowing them out of the water. But they saw that they get paid to do this, and that's why they're an expert. Again, it's that technology adoption as a fashion trend. They didn't view it as a tool that they really need. They would apply the tool if it felt right, or if they were a technology person.
So do you think, comparing, computers are really good at certain tasks, humans are good at certain tasks.
Yep.
When it comes to correlation and causality and just in finding that false positive, do you think that the computer is better at that, or?
So the computer exposes the trends, not the actual end judgment. The bigger issue in correlation and causation with the age that we're living in is spurious relationships. So the more data that you have, the more possible trends there are that look like they could mean something. So it doesn't necessarily apply when you're analyzing 100,000 observations. You're probably not going to have a lot of spurious relationships. But once you start to get into the millions or billions, which are like orders of magnitude above 100,000, you start to see significantly more spurious relationships. So it's you can never prove causation. but what you have to be careful about is understanding and weeding through those random correlations. So there are correlations that actually mean something. So like the ice cream meant something, right? Most of the time humans can think through those, or at least it puts them down the right path. You're narrowing the spectrum of what you're studying. What's real crazy in the big data predictive analytics age is things where it's Tuesdays in Wisconsin, the temperature of Wisconsin on a Tuesday relates to stock stock performance on the S&P 500 3 months later. Okay, yeah, like I can see that that's a relationship, but that's bullshit in the data. That's where data visualization comes in so importantly, and applying it. But again, you're still narrowing your scope enough where a solid researcher, there's still I guess that's the creating experiences. When humans and computers work together, the human experience is elevated. So instead of, like when studying polio, instead of humans looking through thousands of data sets, they're starting to question and be more creative about why is ice cream? Why ice cream? Is it dairy? I should explore that. Is it temperature? I should explore that. Is it like kids congregating someplace and sharing a frosty treat?
It helps narrow it down, but you still get that human touch to kind of make the final decision.
Well, humans are the ones who are creating the code and the technology, so that's obvious. I mean, that's implied, wouldn't it?
Well, that's starting to change. Now that's even starting to change. And that, okay, so that's, I'm really big on this like technology adoption or math adoption as a fashion statement. But like the math people are like, I'm not a social person, or I don't enjoy being funny. Well, if you are now having to use math to create relatable cultural experiences, you better learn to be funny. And the people who are focused on creating beautiful images, and I'm an artist and I'm not a mathematician, well, your art's only going to be seen by 10 people if you don't learn how to leverage analytics and thinking analytically about addressing your market. So I think that's more important to have those merge together.
So in your mind, everything's driven by economy, the need to make money?
You gotta make money. For me, okay, so I study econometrics, and in my view, or my parlance, econometrics is the mathematical modeling of human happiness, or human choice. And human choice being, like money being the proxy for human choice. So I do like if you build something and no one's paying for it or no one's stealing it, then it's not very valuable. Like it probably doesn't deserve to be created. But I do think that we are living in a, like, dollars have eroded in their signaling abilities, because the harder most people work, the harder they work, they still make the same amount of money, but they still have to spend that money, that fixed money, judiciously. So it still is a good proxy for how valuable something is.
Yeah, I think though that's kind of set up with the structure of how we are required to live, as opposed to if we didn't have all these problems or bills or issues, how would you spend your life? Would you spend it developing technology to better the world, or would you be off, hang gliding and in Chile somewhere, or it's to me there's more than just technology and business. You have to look at what we're thrown into, the structure we live into. And me and Tom talk about that a lot.
Have you had P&L responsibility?
What's that? Like
profit and loss, like has the company ridden on your ability to create?
So I have an interest in a recording studio. And I've been in charge of the business development for the past 3-4 years. So absolutely, 100%.
It's a rush.
Yeah,
right?
No, it drives you.
Yeah, like I think you get, like, I love backpacking, and I love like backcountry skiing and stuff. I love my girlfriend, but it all comes down to kind of like hobbies come down to a mixture of excitement, managing risk, and then building something. Like with my girlfriend, I feel like I'm building something. When I'm backpacking, I'm managing risk. That's the same thing I do in my day job.
But you make money.
But I make money. But I would do it. I would do it even if I didn't make money. But there's a human need, I think, to build something, to create something. Like if you just manage things and you're not moving anything forward, you tend to have an existential crisis because we love to create. Yeah.
I think it's just a diverse question. It depends on the individual. Like people are diverse in their desire for things, and people desire money, but why? Like they're really desiring power, validation, control. Like they have control issues possibly.
Right.
Other people have different motivators. Like they're just creative people. I think there's always the sociopaths out there who just crave power and money. I think that's a small percentage of the population. At least I like to think that. I think most of the people, there's kind of a limit. Money's a motivator until you get to a certain point. Like I think there's been studies on it where it's like after $80,000 a year, people don't live any happier. Like that's kind of the break point. So I don't know if there's really like a silver bullet answer to that question.
Well, and I'd like to tie it in kind of, Prince recently passed away. Well, you know how successful Prince is, and he's a creative guy. Inside his vault in his house was like thousands and thousands of music videos that he recorded for thousands of albums that never were heard and never were seen by anyone. Now, why did he do that? It didn't make him any money. It satisfied his need to be creative. And you could say he was already financially successful, so that gave him the opportunity to do that. But he didn't necessarily have to.
So I was reading this book, or this guy hits this point in his career where he's got to figure out, does he elevate his standard of living to his income? He's making, say, $300,000 a year.
Right.
Or does he stay living like a hobo? And he's got responsibility. Society has an incentive to push him to live where his income's at. They don't want him to wear the ratty t-shirt anymore or the 2-year-old Merrill trucker boots. He's been successful, why not enjoy the success? And he realizes at that point that if he elevates his standard of living to his income, then he will be bound to always be able to have to make that income, and he can't reinvest it in a more creative future. So I think you definitely have a point where you have to manage if you really want to be creative, you have to generate profit, you have to generate something that people are willing to pay for, so you have resources to invest, but then also manage your overhead, that metabolic rate, where it's never high enough to distract from your ability to reinvest those resources in your creativity. I mean, that's where you got with Prince, is he had a whole bunch of resources, so he could just create. And he could release the stuff he wanted to, but he could hold on to the stuff he didn't want to release.
But I think we actually had this conversation the other day. I think there's kind of a negative relationship there. Like creative people don't like being constricted by the metabolic rate as you describe it. And like sometimes I feel like that too. Like I'm a very creative person. I like writing software. I used to play guitar, art, all this stuff. But
he's still good at guitar. I heard him play.
But I think sometimes and maybe tying this back to the very first segment, like owning a business and having to deal with payroll and all the stuff that comes along with that, marketing, sales, like sometimes it like almost stifles that creativity. And I feel like, man, like I try to sit down and write some code and I'm just like, I can't do this. I got so many other things I got to do. So like how do you as a business owner like get into that state of mind where like you can really be creative? Like Prince, like he doesn't care about anyone anymore. He's just there. He's got his cameras rolling, his crew, and he's just having fun. Like how do you get there when you don't necessarily have millions of dollars like Prince?
Yeah, so that's
the challenge.
First, the cool thing with that is I think that's where machine learning comes in, is being able to take care, like soon we're really close to having computers and machine learning take care of all of that in our daily life, where payroll, setting up meetings with people, like Gmail already has plugins where you can just set it to auto respond to meeting requests and it'll look at your calendar and respond back in natural language. It's not great yet, but they're releasing new versions every week, so it will get better. That gives us more time to, again, create those experiences. And I really think the thing that's helped my creativity, my ability to produce, is deep dives. When I was going through college, building econometric models, you have to, especially before we had strong software, you had to pour through that data where you were focused on a data table for 2 hours, looking for patterns, looking for for errors and outliers and washing those out. And what that taught me was go deep. Like, go deep on a problem, and don't pop up, don't be distracted until you've solved that. The other piece of that is sketching. So Leonardo da Vinci invented sketching as a way to hone his ability to think. You see, you know, for the first time in art, you saw layers and layers and layers, where he had drawn stuff out and then drawn something else over it, painted over it, drawn over it, and they were those paintings. His drawings are thick with lines and different versions. You have the invention of writing, you know, where we're able to put something, that a concept in our mind, and actually create an artifact that forces us to really think through the whole thing. And so I go deep, and then I work to create artifacts. So if you can have a thought but you can't build something out of it, you don't really know it. You didn't really have that thought. You just had a flash. And so if you can struggle with it, and you understand that your goal is to have something tangible, I think you'll have a much more creative process, especially if you can take that tangible thing, put it somewhere for a while, come back to it a week or two later. Again, that's having those resources where you don't have to ship it right away. You can come back a little bit later, or have other people on your team look at it. But there's too many business people out there who have a flash of an idea, but they cannot think through the whole artifact. They don't have the words because they haven't studied it enough to be able to communicate it to the technical or to the creative person. And so they're kind of just nudging in one direction or the other the process of building something that they think they have a crystal clear vision from. And then that comes back to, it used to be you couldn't learn anything on the internet. Well, now you can. You don't have to go to university. So it used to be that you'd go to business school if you were intelligent, or you'd go to some strategy thing, or medical school if you were intelligent. And if you were more of a tactile person and not, you know, maybe as savvy, you'd go to trade school. So business people look down on technical people, on creative people, because traditionally that kind of made sense. But now it doesn't, because you have the ability. Business people have tools now that they can go out and sketch. They can go out and create. They can get closer to the final product before they have to bring in the experts. And they need to stop poo-pooing that. I recently heard a Deloitte consultant tell me that he doesn't create. He only critiques. Well, if you're going to manage experiences, if you're going to work with, if we're going to eliminate some of this administrative tasks, the role that's left for business people is to take that strategy, take that relatability, that understanding of how humans work and how society functions, and actually create. Because when you hand something over to someone to review, you don't want them to tell you what's wrong with it. You want them to give you a new look. But all of our society is built on, I hand something over to someone and they don't just tell me they tell me what's wrong with it. They don't give me a new look at it. But we have school that teaches us that, you know, with grading, managers do that to us. But as a creative person, when I'm done building something, when I'm super tired of it, it's because I can't see a different iteration of it, the next iteration of it. And that's when I need my team members, my managers, is to contribute to my process.
What did you mention about the black swan? Because that was a...
yeah, we can talk about that real quick too. One last comment about that. I have this quote on my wall, and maybe I should take it down, I don't know. It says, your job is not to be creative. Everyone's creative. Your job is to ship. Yeah. And the thought behind that was that, you know, everybody's creative. Like, that's nothing, there's nothing special. I think I heard this from a talk from some marketer, I can't remember who it was, but the guys who created the Matrix, like, they came up with this whole fantasy world and everything. Like, that wasn't the hard part. Everybody could do that. Like, everyone's really creative. Not everyone, but the vast majority of people, they can come up with this fantasy world and these creatures and all this stuff. But the difference was, like, they actually made a movie. Yeah. You know? Well,
they created, and that's what I mean. Like, create the artifact. Don't just give me this concept, this light concept, but put it into its final form, or get it as close as you possibly can in its final form. Because as you move through the iterations towards the final form, your concept will be honed. Like, you'll realize you can't do something, or like this thing doesn't work. like yeah, like you'll have a manager who's like, I want a manly, like a masculine brand. And you'd be like, you have tall, thin lettering. Like that doesn't work. Well, I like this tall, thin lettering. Okay, yeah. But then you want a squatty, dark brand? Like high contrast brand? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Cool. All right, well, hold on. We'll come right back with our last segment here. We'll talk about black swans and wrap things up. So stay tuned.
Cool. Let's see you.
Alright guys, thanks for coming back. Our final segment here. We're doing a few more segments than usual, but we're kind of on a roll, so just going to go with it. We have one last kind of topic or question, I guess, for Grant here about predictive analytics, and this was around black swans. So black swans, for people who don't know what that means, it's an unforeseen event, like 9/11, for example. You know, people could be analyzing the stock market and figuring out what's the current corporate profits, what's the Fed doing with interest rate, those sort of things, analyzing it, and all of a sudden this event comes from out of nowhere that no one suspected or could have really kind of ever predicted, and then totally changes the model. And the term comes from, I think back in England or something, they thought all swans were white.
Well, yeah, they didn't think black swans existed until they found
one.
Yeah, in Australia.
So I guess the question is, how does that factor into predictive analytics? Because obviously, I mean, that's almost something, by definition, you can't predict.
So one of the really interesting things about, so predictive analytics got started as econometrics, so it's in the economics profession. And the first thing that they really push on when studying economics is that knowledge is four-dimensional, that it's moving through time. So even if you feel like you understood something, that doesn't mean that it applies today. Like you understood it 6 months ago, you don't understand it today. It also, in that four-dimensional piece, things are changing constantly, and you have you're studying a lot of different variables. So at different levels of scales, things are qualitatively different. At 1 million units, something is different than it is at 10,000 units. So with those two things combined, that things are hitting these points where they are transforming, that they are changing state, they reach a size where they hit a state change, or they hit or that the variables and their relationships change because it's four-dimensional. Economists are the challenging part of the profession is knowing when not to model or when not to trust yourself. Now with a lot of the hype around big data and predictive analytics and machine learning, you have computer scientists and engineers entering the modeling profession. And in engineering, the emphasis is if it works, like if this thing does not break, we can test whether or not it'll break. And if it does not break, it is the best solution. In economics, it's the exact opposite of if this thing works, if I feel like I understand this, I probably don't. They train you when you go get an economics degree on actually being very apologetic and not making like real statements. So you know, Bric recommends something. Bric does not know exactly what is going to happen. You know, Bric provides you a most likely scenario. And what's really interesting with the field is that engineers have got into it and they're trained that if it works, that if 2 + 2 = 4, then I'm done, I figured it out, like let's move on. And so I think that.
But do you calculate that into the equation when you're looking at something? Okay, here's all the inputs of different possibilities, and we're going to make decisions based upon that. And you know, here's the end result, right? 2 + 2 = 4. A a certain degree of certainty. But then do you factor in another layer and say, well, we're going to just factor in this little fudge number because there are things like black swans. We don't know exactly what it is or what it could factor, but we're going to factor it into the equation.
So you do. Every model has an X factor, that the uncaptured amount. Your key is to understand the symmetry of the risk. So things that are, if a risk is symmetrical, being 2% wrong has 2% cost. If things are asymmetrical, a 2% error could result in $300 billion worth of money lost.
Right.
So your goal is to understand your risk of being wrong, and that's why I use that term less right. Is you're not trying to make a more or less wrong. You're not trying to make a solution that's more right. You're trying to make a solution that's less wrong. You have to show yourself that you're acknowledging that your model is wrong. Like, it's not right. It can't be right. You're modeling something. You're not reproducing it. And with that frame of mind, then you're getting into, okay, what happens if I'm wrong? How bad does this matter? What are the things that we're not studying? So like 9/11, you had a state change in basically feelings of a group of people who felt that they were disadvantaged because of America. It had been there for a long time. It probably was trending. People were probably studying, the radicalization of Islam by the Wahhabis that were encouraged by Lawrence of Arabia and the Sauds. People had known about this. It had been something that had been going on for a long time. But you reached a point where it hit a state change, and now people were ready to attack the people that they blamed for their lot in life. And so I think you have to approach things understanding what are the costs of if I'm wrong, and not fooling yourself that just because it works out mathematically that I'm right, that I am modeling something, that I'm not reproducing it.
That makes sense. I think we're going to wrap up here because this has turned into a long show. Real quick before we end it, can you tell everybody, where they can find your product and find out more about what you guys do? So
you can find more about what we're doing at getbric.com. That's GETBRIC.com. I also blog there about how to run a creative agency, and I'm starting to produce some more about machine learning and predictive analytics and my thought on the future of technology and how humans and computers will work together. All right, cool. Well, thanks, guys, and we'll catch you next show.
Thanks.